Apire nene waju Kibo binu leo tongi chol Apire nene waju wachon Kibo binu leo tongi chol ba Umuboroni alua Utaratibu chamuke puchol Binu jaro pia pira Udogotin kuji palo ronye Penyi loyo Utaratibu chamuke puchol Binu jaro pia pira Udogotin kuji palo ronye Penyi loyo
Why? What Acana looks powerful is what Apire failing the hand game. The Acholi cultural institution, Acholi, has for the last 2 decades stood as something which was supposed to be a unifying symbol of the Acholi people, embodying centuries of tradition, leadership, and identity. Yet in the recent years, deep cracks have emerged within the institution, culminating in a powerful struggle between 2 men, Rwot Acana II, the long-serving paramount chief, and Rwot Richard Santo Apire, the man who rose as the face of reform and challenge. At first, it seemed like Apire's camp carried real momentum. He rallied disgruntled chiefs, pushed for a new constitution, and even claimed that his side had successfully registered and gazetted leadership changes. For many, this looked like the beginning of the end of Acana's hold on the institution. But today, 1 year later, the script appears reversed. Acana looks more powerful than ever, while Apire has grown increasingly silent, unable to translate his claims into cultural authority. This raises a critical question. Is Apire failing the endgame? The roots of the dispute. Let's see this. To understand the present, we must revisit the origins. Rwot David Acana II ascended in 2005 after his father, cementing a hereditary succession line. However, some chiefs objected to the hereditary model, arguing that the paramountcy should rotate among the 58 recognized chiefdoms. The certification grew, fueled by allegations that Acana had failed to provide a constitution, mismanaged funds, and attempted to sell valuable land belonging to the Acholi people. Enter Rwot Apire, a respected chief in his own right. He emerged as the spearhead of reform, calling for a return to inclusivity and accountability. In 2023 and 2024, his fraction drafted their own constitution, organized elections, and boldly proclaimed him as the new paramount chief. But ambition collided with reality. The Ugandan state, through the Ministry of Gender, rejected the changes. Security forces arrested chiefs involved in the elections. Religious mediators were accused of bias, and Acana, refusing to bow out, branded his rivals as masqueraders and doubled down on his leadership. So why Acana looks powerful today, you may wonder. Despite the turbulence, Acana has weathered the storm and emerged even stronger. His current position rests on 4 pillars: state recognition, community presence, though half, ceremonial continuity, and narrative control. Let's take a look at the first one. Number 1, the state recognition. In Uganda, cultural institutions survive not just on ancestral legitimacy, but also on government recognition. You saw Muozi visited Rwot Acana, no other person. The Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development regulates leadership. On this front, Acana remains the officially recognized paramount chief. This gives him access to state security, diplomatic standing, and institutional funding advantages that Apire simply cannot match. The second thing is the community presence. Although it is a hub, leadership in Acholi culture is lived in the community. A chief who disappears from public functions loses relevance. Over the last year, Acana has been highly visible, attending burials, presiding over rituals, engaging with youth, and representing Acholi at regional and national platforms. Every handshake, every speech, every appearance reinforces him as the face of Acholi leadership. He moved in many districts, talking about Acholi. Apire, by contrast, has been silent. He has not held a coronation. He has not mobilized large public functions, and his voice has faded in community forums. For ordinary Acholi, silence equals absence, and absence equals weakness. The third thing is the ceremonial continuity. Cultural authority is sustained through ritual, coronations, cleansing ceremonies, and collective gatherings cement the spiritual bond between leader and people. Acana has maintained these traditions without interruption. Apire's failure to hold a coronation or conduct parallel ceremonies has left his claim incomplete. In African traditional politics, a chief without ritual enthronement is a chief in a name only. He was coronated as the chief of Atiak, but not as the paramount chief after the Kitgum election. The fourth thing is the narrative control. Perception is power. Acana has successfully framed these opponents as imposters, opportunists, and even tools of disaster. This narrative resonates because it aligns with state endorsement and visible activity, no matter even if we shout like what. Meanwhile, Apire's narrative, rooted in reform and accountability, has lost traction without consistent mobilization. Chiefs who initially sympathized now face pressure to return to the mainstream camp. Now, why Apire appears to be losing? If Acana's strength is growing, Apire's weakness is becoming obvious. Three key failures define his current position: failure of momentum, failure of recognition, and failure of strategy. The first one, the failure of momentum. When Apire's faction organized their dramatic election in June 2024, it shocked the establishment. Many actually supported, but also some did not support. But arrests, disruptions, and government rejection cut the moment short. Since then, there has been no visible revival, no coronation, no community rallies, no renewed push, just opening office. Movements without momentum fade into memory. The second thing is the failure of recognition. Even if Apire claims to be gazetted, the fact that the Ugandan state and majority of chiefs do not recognize him renders the gazetting meaningless, because the chiefs who are recognizing him, though the number could be balanced, the state is overriding them. Legal recognition in Kampala ensures legitimacy in Gulu. Without this bridge, Apire's authority remains a contested dream. The third thing is failure of strategy. Apire's silence may be tactical, a decision to lie low until conditions favor a resurgence, but strategy in politics requires visibility. Even in culture, a silent leader cannot inspire, cannot consolidate, and cannot outmaneuver an opponent who is actively performing leadership. Each month of silence deepens the impression that Apire's claim has collapsed. Is this the end game? The question now is whether Apire's struggle has already ended in defeat. On one hand, his silence and inactivity signal that his camp may have lost the resources, alliances, and morale needed to continue. On the other hand, cultural politics in Acholi is fluid, and discontent over hereditary rule has not vanished. It is possible that Apire is regrouping quietly, waiting for a moment when either government policy shifts or China faces fresh controversies that weaken his standing. However, without immediate signs of revival, such as a public coronation, an organized council of chiefs, creating things like cultural events which China did, or visible cultural functions, Apire risk being remembered not as a reformist victor, but as a failed challenger. What this means for the Acholi people: The broader consequences of this struggle is a divided cultural institution. While Acana remains in command, the unresolved grievances that fueled Apire's rise, question of accountability, land and relationship leadership, still simmer beneath the surface. Acana may have won the current battle, but unity among the Acholi chiefs is fractured. For now, however, the balance of power is clear. Acana stands tall, active and recognized, while Apire retreats in silence. In conclusion, Acana looks powerful today, not because he silenced all dissent, but because he mastered the fundamentals of cultural legitimacy and the state game. The state recognition, community presence, ritual continuity, and narrative control. That is the thing that Apire is seeing it as an oversight. That Apire is not looking at it as an important thing. What Apire meanwhile appears to be failing the end game, because his movement stalled at the critical moment. Without coordination, my friend, oh my dear people, without recognition and without consistent momentum, the Acholi people, pragmatic in their embrace of visible authority, are rallying behind the leader who shows up, not the leader who remains silent. Unless Apire reawakens his movement with new energy and visible action, history will likely remember him as a man who tried but failed to dethrone the paramount chief. So it's time for Apire to make his position clear, or else. And so the Acholi throne remains steady under Rwot David Acana II, while the alternative fades into whispers. This is not statements to support any of the candidates, Acana or Apire. Their tension remains their tension. This is an independent analytical perspective. Thank you.